Do you have a yearbook quote?
No, I don't think I did. But if I did, I would be like probably Dom Toretto. I live my life a quarter mile at a time. Fast and Furious, you two are both staring at me quickly.
Hello and welcome to Cleopatra. I'm Christy Bonnet.
And I'm Lynn Molly, and this is a podcast about two Middle Eastern comedy queens digging up the funny from the first generation experience.
Our guest today is an LA-based comedian. She performs all around, and she's a lovely human being. Please give it up at home for Miss Galina Rivina. Wee, wee, wee.
Ooh, thank you for rolling the R on my last name. I'm all hot and bothered now. We just started.
That's authentic Ukrainian R
Sure
roll,
is.
right? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Which I guess leads to our guest is a Ukrainian comedian and not actually first generation.
I know I was going to say, I feel like I'm throwing a wrench in the asshole or whatever the platitude is because I'm not first gen. I'm just an immigrant without an accent.
But don't worry, you're not throwing a wrench at all.
Imagine if we were like no immigrants.
Right. That would be very weird.
First gen only. You'd be done with this podcast in a couple months.
Yeah,
that would be it. You would have exhausted all of the options.
Right. So we like to start generally by asking people about their origin stories. People go back to their parents, their grandparents, sometimes even their great-great-grandparents, however far back you think is interesting / necessary / something that you feel is like relevant to
How you got here.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll do that. I don't have many generations worth of stories because everyone in my family doesn't talk about that thing.
Right.
There's too much trauma. You don't hear about people that died before you were born.
Right.
But our family, so I was born in Ukraine, in Odesa, which was the USSR back then. So I've just been having an identity crisis for 2 years because I always used to use Russian and Ukrainian interchangeably because I speak Russian, I don't speak Ukrainian, and that's kind of how it is in a lot of the big cities there.
Wow.
So my mom grew up in Ukraine. My dad grew up in what is now Belarus in a town called Gomel, which I don't even know how to like say it without the accent. I've never heard the American pronunciation. And then before that, everyone was just kind of spread around the USSR cities. There's one story that I don't know how true it is. My dad might be embellishing it, but I love it. Just the idea of this story that my dad's family back a few generations used to breed horses for the Tsar.
Oh.
Like Nicholas and them.
Wow.
And then when the Romanov family got executed and chased out of town, I guess everyone that worked for them left. And allegedly that branch of the family like hid in Spain for a bit, which might be why I have a more Spanish sounding last name.
Oh.
So that is folklore. I have not done the work to fact check it,
Yeah,
but I
Rivina.
love
Yeah,
the
you're
story.
right.
Have you inherited any horse girl tendencies from this experience?
My thighs are a decent size, but that's about it. I don't even like riding horses. I have a couple times, but the last time I got on a horse, so I grew up in Ohio. We immigrated when I was just on the cusp of turning 5, and so I had a very American upbringing. I learned English off of watching Rugrats over the summer. Like by the time I went to school in the fall, I was completely fluent in English. It was the
Oh my
craziest
God.
thing.
Wow.
And you
Just
knew
'cause
that
you
a baby had to do what a baby's got to do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I became the mouthpiece for the family because they were like, well, we don't know English, so why don't you just do the bidding for us? And now I'm
Wow.
in therapy talking about how I was made to be an adult at such a young age.
Right.
But I digress. So I ended up learning how to speak English really, really quickly and like being at the forefront of the family, which was nuts. And I also was raised, I have 2 stepbrothers now, but I was raised an only child. So like that was it.
Wow.
I forget where I was going with that.
So rewind a little bit. How did your parents meet?
Oh, I wish they hadn't. Twice divorced
The
from each
question is
other.
why
Did my parents
have
meet?
to meet?
Yeah, so my mom was 20 and my dad 32, and they met at a point where she was already feeling desperate because all of her friends, all her peers were married and having babies already.
Because she was that old at 20.
She was that old at 20,
Right.
you know, gave birth to me well before her frontal cortex was done. Thank you so much. And they decided to get married after only about 3 dates. So they really did not know each other. My mom had no sense of my dad's background, didn't know his family much, was just like, oh, well, here's this like handsome single guy, so I guess I'll just get married. And it was a pretty quick turnaround. And then I was born right around 9 months later.
Wow.
Yeah. And then they
Wow.
got divorced in Ukraine. And by the time those proceedings were going on, the paperwork had already started to get us our green cards to come over here. So they were like,
Wow.
well, let's get back together. Let's get her over to the States. Let's get set up there. And then they did that. And about 7 years later, they were like, do you remember that we hate each other? We should probably separate. So at that point, they kind of got divorced again when I was in 7th grade.
They were like, reboot. Okay.
yeah, divorce 2.0.
Doing it better. This time it is personal. Oh my gosh. Wow.
I guess my question would be what, because I know Ukraine has a very complicated history, and obviously we do not expect you to know all the details. But
You don't? But what if I know
should know
them?
them already, but you say them first so that I can tell you if you're right.
so what led to them wanting to relocate to America?
Oh,
Or
so it
needing
is
to.
awful there still. Never got good. Can you
heard.
believe? So, from what I understand, my mom's side of the family was actually okay financially. They were like what you would consider middle class. My grandpa was like a career, the equivalent of the Marines or the Navy for the Russian army. So he was traveling a lot and was able to financially take care of things. But then my grandmother was really, really ill. They didn't know what it was for the longest time. It turned out to be some kind of, like she had diabetes, she was bedridden, she had some other mysterious illness, and she couldn't walk, and she didn't regain her ability to walk till we got to the States, and she got American medicine, which is wild. But when we were in Ukraine, you like couldn't buy property. You were just like given an apartment. And so they lived in this 1-bedroom, 400 square foot apartment. And it was my parents, my grandparents, and me in a 400 square foot
Wow.
apartment. So
It's like LA.
it's exactly
rent
like LA,
prices.
just Ukraine. So they ended up having my grandma's sister won a lotto, I guess, and came over to the States first. And then we were able to get asylum, like on religious asylum, because we're Jewish. So we were able to get green cards on that and come over, and then did the whole rigmarole of waiting 10 years, taking citizenship tests.
Wow.
And I'm coming up on 30 years now, which is wild.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I'm thinking we should put winning a lotto
Right.
on the bingo card. We have
Immigrant
a bingo card of
yeah.
Of
things that
immigrants?
come up a lot.
Amazing.
And then winning the lottery
It
to
comes up
America
a
is
lot?
one of them. Yeah. Engineer dad, French speaking mom.
Yeah. So my dad's, he was an engineer over there, but here he's not licensed at all. So he
Right.
just does like
Very common.
porter work, like electrical work, but never bothered getting licensed here.
Still sounds like we could check that off the bingo
think
card
we
as
can,
well. Yeah.
yeah.
Maybe your episode will be the big where somebody wins.
Yes.
The imaginary card.
Wow. Okay. And so they settled straight in Ohio.
Yeah, because our extended family was in Cleveland, and there's actually a decent Russian-speaking community in Cleveland, so it was like pretty easy to set up shop there, and they're still there.
I'm also kind of curious about the Jewish religious asylum. Was there a, I mean, again, I don't want to dig into history too much if you don't have a full political, like.
I just know the vibes were off.
Okay.
They basically were like, hey, if you're Jewish, you might want to skedaddle.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
It was more or less that. So everyone in my family either went to the U.S. because they got lucky, and if they didn't, they ended up in Israel because that was like just an easy place for them to get citizenship.
Okay. You heard it here first. The vibes were off.
The vibes were bad.
We best skedaddle. Tell us about growing up in Ohio.
Very similar to Ukraine. No.
Same thing.
Real chill. I'm glad that I moved to LA and that I have a comparison to make to it. But my childhood was just like very suburban. Went to a school, graduating class was about 140 kids. So everybody knew everybody. And it was a lot of upper middle class people, which we were not. So it was always like, everyone has Birkenstocks. I have the Costco knockoffs. Everyone has a North Face jacket. I have the insert whatever discount store knockoff of that. So I did feel a little ostracized, and I also got ripped for having a first and last name that rhyme all the time. So I think that's how I ended up in comedy, because being funny just became a defense mechanism after a while, because while there were a few other immigrants in my class, it was a pretty small fraction of us. So just having a name that wasn't like Jessica or Julia or Samantha, like something really normal, you just felt like an outsider.
Isn't Galina like a stone, like a beautiful stone?
I don't know. It was my great-grandmother's name, and as far as like Soviet culture, it's a super common name. It's like any of the ones I just listed where everybody has it, so nobody thinks it's like a special name. And then you come over here and it's like, oh, I'm the only person with this name. Great.
Right. Can't wait for this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did your parents name you Christy? Because my parents named me Lynn because they wanted me to have a name that worked wherever they ended up. Is that how you got Christy, or is Christy like a derivative of a more Egyptian name?
No, they wanted it, I think, to be like American, but then they also wanted a Christian, so there's Christ right in there. So he'll never leave me. Anytime people are like, how do you spell it? I say Christ, I-E, and then they're like, and then I go, I know, I'm sorry.
I can't believe they don't like that.
Yeah, just staring somebody straight in the eyes saying Christ, I-E is apparently not as palatable as I thought it might be, but
I mean, it landed on this podcast.
Everyone knows how to. I said that during a mock trial competition once in law school, and the fake judge laughed at me, and I was like, "You asked, Your Honor."
I rest my case.
Yes, I let the record reflect, because it's fewer syllables.
I'm envious. Even just today, I was on the phone with this company, and I have to spell my name for them, and I'm like, Galina, and they're like, Galina. I'm like, walk it back, Galina. Delina. Yeah, no, I said Galina. Like, okay, stop.
You have
just
to
stop.
the GIF versus GIF
How come
debate.
you can say, but people can say Greg and Gwen, and anytime I start to spell my name, it's always Galina, and I'm like, well, but guh. Right. But I said guh.
That's so funny. You would do very well in Egypt, actually, because out of all the Arabic-speaking the countries that Egypt actually pronounces the j sound a hard g. So like the name Jamal anywhere like else in Egypt, it's Gamal. So people wouldn't call you Galina, they'd call you Galina, and you would do really well. So that can be your first stop.
I love that. Well, let me throw some geography at you. Where I was born, Odesa is just across the Black Sea from Egypt.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right.
Sometimes the map stuff really gets to me. I'm like, it's really that close?
Yeah, I don't know how close. I don't know how big the Black Sea is. Let's not do details here. I'm not that much of an expert, but I remember always looking and being like, well, that's kind of cool. I grew up theoretically not that far from Egypt.
I met a girl in Paris who was Ukrainian, and she told me that she was Middle Eastern, and I was like, oh, where? And she's like, Ukraine. And I was like, that's interesting.
Well, that math doesn't math, so I don't know.
I was like, I'll accept you. You seem cool to me.
That's crazy. So yeah, it's interesting that you're not the first person we've had on this podcast having to be the representative of the family at such a young age. Fill out the paperwork, translate this. You are sort of the administrative assistant and the representative and the executor of the family. And
unpaid internship, full time.
Absolutely. You didn't ask for this.
No.
How did you navigate that?
Well, I'm navigating it now in therapy.
Yeah, you're like very much retroactively. Yeah. That's how I'm navigating
retroactively, I'm sure I thought it was the absolute tits when I was young that I was getting to make decisions. I remember we went to Florida on vacation once, and we were at a rental office for like a Hertz or Enterprise, whatever. My parents were like, you got to do the talking. So I'm like, give us the convertible. And then we got the convertible.
That's amazing.
And I was like 9.
Wow. What a great leverage where you're like, oh, they're out of everything on the menu except for the chicken fingers. So we're all getting chicken fingers. Sorry. Ice cream for dinner.
They're still kind of self-conscious. My mom more so than my dad, even though her English is really good, but she's very self-conscious. And to this day, when I'm with her, she makes me take the reins on doing things, and she doesn't like to have to ask a person at the store where something is. I'm like, Mother, use your words. You can ask where the deodorant is. It's not a big deal. I don't need to do it for you. Like, we've been here 30 years.
Yeah.
But sometimes I feel like the people won't, like with my parents, they speak very good English. They both work in American companies, but I'll see people cannot hear them until I will then say the same exact thing, but also in English. But it's like, I think a lot of people really shut down when they hear accents and they just like assume they can't understand.
You would think, even with your family, like being in Jersey, I mean, the amount of immigrants that are over there, it's not like we're talking about some podunk town in Oklahoma where they've never heard an accent before. So that's startling.
Yeah. I don't think it's that big of a deal. It's kind of like how, like, when an idea needs to be said in a boardroom by a man for it to actually reach the sound waves. Yeah. I think it just, like, usually feels more valid, and, like, when it's in a deeper register coming from, and that's just, like, absolutely, I'm just so on board with that.
So what you're saying is, tell my mother to ask for deodorant like this.
Where's the deodorant? Obviously kidding. Okay, so then Ohio, when did you leave Ohio?
The second I graduated college.
Okay, so you stayed for college.
Yeah, stick in a bindle and came over to California.
And I rode the rails, hobo style.
Yeah, I just had a feeling. Well, I wanted to be in a big city. I wanted to have more opportunities. I was not thinking about doing stand-up at the time. I was actually trying to become a real estate mogul. So I was like, oh, let me go to LA. It's always sunny there. I just had it with Cleveland weather. I mean, it is like one of the most extreme cities because it's on the Great Lakes, so it gets lake effect snow. And one of my last winters there, I got into this terrible car accident.
Oh, no.
Where I had a sports car with sports tires that I did not
that you negotiated from
that
the Hertz Rent-A-Car.
Exactly. I was like, my parents are behind me, even though I'm paying for this now. But the sports tires were not equipped for winter, and I was on a highway on my way to work, and I spun out on black ice. I took the front end off of my car. Thankfully, I was okay, but I was like shaking and traumatized about driving for a while after that. And then it was just a brutal winter of having to scrape ice off my car. And I was like, I'm not doing this again. So that summer, I just worked the whole summer. I saved up all my money and I was like, I'm just going to try it in LA. And I came out with a one-way ticket and not much of a plan. And I basically got really lucky. I got this job that ended up being a fucking nightmare that I then had to get out of, but luckily it set me up in LA. I was able to get an apartment really quickly. I got the job like I think 5 or 6 days after getting to town. So that
at
was,
a real estate agency?
That's what they said it would be.
Oh,
It was a property management company where I was told I would be doing property management, but I was really stuck into like an accounts payable role in a cubicle, which had always been my nightmare growing up, to work in a cubicle. And the company culture was one where people were so fed up with their jobs that even though they'd been there 6, 8, 10 years, people would just leave for lunch and not come back. Like almost no one even put a 2-week notice in because it was so outrageously miserable there. And one time, I'll never forget it, our COO quit in like a rage and left like a warning letter on his computer to the next COO about how horrible the company was. Yeah.
I feel like LA really, because you didn't have the experience of moving here for a first time, really, because you're from here. It like really has a way of testing you when you first come here. It's real sad in the beginning.
It's so sad. My first year here was my worst year here. It was so traumatizing. It was so isolating and depressing. And it's really a miracle that I made it. And the other miracle is that I didn't recognize how bad it was until several years later, because I had been such an optimist and I was so excited about being here to begin with that it wasn't until later that I was like, oh my God, I had no friends. I lived alone. I was in a job that I hated. I had peeping Toms at that apartment, so I also didn't feel safe. It was just like such a traumatic first year. I wasn't alone.
Don't be silly. They're always here watching over me.
Yeah, and it took a few years to be like, oh my God, what did I go through?
Someone once told me that there is LA and then there's sad LA. And I think about that often.
They're not mutually exclusive either.
The Venn diagram is a very, very
one circle.
Close circle. Yeah. I mean, doesn't every city, though, have that seedy underbelly? Like everyone says same thing about like New York. You moved to New York and how could you be so lonely with all of these people around you?
But I feel like you moved to New York to be a little sad. You know, you moved there to be a little grungy and
really?
moody. I think so.
I feel like everybody I know who moves to New York is like, start spreading the news. And they're like really ready for it. But
I would move to New York to like look out my window during the rain and be poetic, you know?
It's funny you're talking about this because that was my first choice when I was in college. I almost picked New York over coming here because at the time my now stepbrother was living in Manhattan and he had such a cool place and he had a whole group of friends. So I was like, oh, how nice would it be to go over there when I'm done with school? But I'm pretty sure that it would have been a terrible experience. I would have gotten, I think, flooded out during Sandy because that would have been the year I was moving there. I for sure would have lived in a basement infested with cockroaches.
Right.
And I'm lucky that the universe swayed me to move here instead because I don't think I would have lasted.
There's also something about the endless subway ride because after a while it doesn't feel like individual subway rides. It just feels like one long subway ride that you're on forever, just going like taking 45 minutes to get around Brooklyn when it's just like 2 miles everywhere you're going.
Oh yeah, it wouldn't have worked out for. And the other thing is you're never alone there, but I actually need a little bit of solitude. I recharge in solitude. And if I was there, at least here you have roommates. That's often a common thing. But like I have my time in my car by myself. I wouldn't even have that in New York.
The one thing I will say for New York, though, as a writer, it is like endlessly fascinating. There's so much to see and observe and experience. I just find I get very hyper stimulated when I'm there, which I like from a creativity standpoint, but yeah, also draining.
I will sacrifice the creativity.
Yeah, you surf now, so
Yeah.
It's actually very funny how many comedians are introverts.
Yeah, I'm definitely a mix of both. I can be super extroverted, but there's a fairly low ceiling to it where, like, let's say you go to the Comedy Store on a Monday night and you're like running into all your friends and all of a sudden you're playing catch up with 30 people. I'm so tired after that where I'm like, I want to go home. I don't want to talk to another human being for at least 24 hours. I just need that time to reset.
That's so wild because I literally went this Monday and ran into every single person I've ever met.
That's what happens.
But I have the opposite because I'm a huge extrovert, so I get all my energy. So then I came home and I was like, I will never sleep again. So it was.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah. No,
I
it's
usually, not. I'm kind of in between both of you. It's a weird social roulette of like, how's Christy gonna leave this event? Sometimes it'll be like with my knuckles dragging on the floor, and sometimes it'll be me like tap dancing out of there, but nothing in between.
My therapist says I need to find a way to release the energy after like a big social event like that at night because I can't sleep. And I was like, it sounds like you're buying my Peloton, madam.
I was just picturing a dance montage of you like in a mirror with a sweatband.
You're just kundalini shaking.
So out of curiosity, if you wanted to be a real estate mogul, what did you study? Business? Is that what you studied?
I did, yeah.
Okay.
Business management and marketing. And when I was 18, I got my real estate license in Ohio. But oopsie daisy. No, it wasn't because it was 2008, literally the worst year possible that you could get into real estate. I got my real estate license and they like handed it going, are you sure?
That's so
Are you sure
funny.
about this right now? And what I did was I just like shadowed all these other realtors at this like pretty high-end brokerage in Ohio. But I just like hosted open houses for other people. And then I fell into apartment leasing. And then I just cascaded down a hillside of real estate related jobs, which I still like. I'm a loan signing agent during the day. Like I sign mortgages and shit just because that's what my resume reflects.
What does that entail?
I watch people sign their mortgages and then I stamp them.
Oh, okay.
I do love that you have a very stable, flexible day job. I personally feel that having a day job is really helpful to artists.
It can be, but I will negate what you said. It is super unstable.
Oh, okay.
How so?
Because it depends so much on the real estate market. And so I was crazy busy 2020, 2021 when the rates were low. I, just had to turn down work. It was chaotic. And then last year, nothing. Like I went back to Uber Eats driving for a minute. I was doing like random freelance writing jobs. I was really struggling with things last year, and only recently has it like steadied out again because what I do is so incredibly dependent on the market.
While we're talking about Venn diagrams, I wonder how much of that has to do with the writer's strike, to be honest, in Los Angeles.
I think that was definitely a factor. Yeah, absolutely. And the rates were so high, and yet the house prices here did not come down at all. So they kept going up. And then the interest rate, went from 2 something to 7. So everyone was like, well, I missed the boat. So I guess I'm just going to sit here and not sell and not buy. And I'm like, cool, I guess I'll just eat ramen. Thank you.
If it's any consolation, I would love to buy a house that you could make some money on. But it seems like our generation is always going to be one step behind what we need to make anything happen.
Lucky us.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's always that one moment in a podcast where I'm like, should I say the darkest thing I'll ever say in my life?
You cannot set up a cliffhanger like that.
I mean, I'm like, I've already picked a death date, actually, and it's circled on my calendar. So this doesn't apply to me. Is anytime somebody says, like, Lynn is always like, our generation is at least once an episode, you're like, we're not going to have houses. We're not going to have people to care for us.
Is this on the bingo card?
Yeah,
We
this should be on the bingo
I'm
card.
incredibly optimistic.
That's more like
some
millennial
say.
bingo, not immigrant bingo.
That's
but
true.
Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I always have to make that choice of like how light should I be keeping it? And usually I always side with evil Kermit on the left side of that's like, say it.
My parents are always like, well, you'll get our house. I'm like, oh, the one that's priced at Ohio prices that's mortgaged out to the gills? Thank you so much. I can't wait.
Can't wait to get back to scraping that ice.
Yeah.
I mean, could we like turn it into a fourth wall comedy club?
We could absolutely do that. It has enough bedrooms to do 5-minute sets in every room.
We're bringing the slotted
Yeah.
to
Couple
Ohio.
lights and enough black paint for
One
the
room
walls.
will be a podcast studio.
Phenomenal.
That's a good business plan, though. I'm going to turn it into slotted mics all at the house. We're going to call it Galina's back room, and then everyone that doesn't know me is going to call it Jelina's back room.
Amazing. We always have one business idea per pod that
Yeah.
we really
I
do
love
want
that.
to shop out. So this is it for that.
I'll cut you in.
Thank you so much.
Ooh.
And we do have a record of it now. So that's the important thing. That's why we do this, actually.
Honestly, with the whole like TikTok online clips movement, I have noticed stand-up picking up in all these cities besides LA and New York, and it becoming very much popular everywhere. So I wouldn't be surprised if the scene out there is.
It's good. It's been good as long as I've been doing stand-up. I'm really fortunate that even though I started here, the Cleveland scene has been like really embracing of me. Every time I go home, I get booked on a bunch of shows, and the shows are good. They're bar shows. People are enthusiastic. They want to go out. It's an experience.
Love it.
And I have noticed a resurgence of audiences too, right? Like post-pandemic, everyone's so excited to go out, and there's so much more content. And I
Yeah.
think more motivation all around for people to put on shows and for audience members to attend them.
Yeah.
I did a show in Santa Barbara, and the audience members thanked us after.
Yeah.
I feel like in LA we have to apologize
Yeah.
for having a show.
That's
I
a
feel
good
like in
point.
LA you have to apologize for being alive.
Yeah, that's true.
Exactly.
Speaking of like, so was it just the sun and the reputation of LA of like this great sunny place that drew you here?
No, okay, you got me. I had a crush on a boy that I followed out here.
Oh, that's okay.
So many of my major life decisions.
Okay, Felicity.
This is so embarrassing though, but I feel like it's the universe guiding me when I don't have the wherewithal to guide myself. But some of my major life changes have happened on the back of me having a crush on a guy that was doing that thing. And then I started doing it. Like I had a crush on a comedian. That's how I started doing stand-up, which is so embarrassing. But
Which is exactly how not to date that man. He does
is,
not
it
want a
is.
funny woman. I'm
no,
sorry.
The
Don't date
beautiful.
them, steal their identity. I love it.
That's how you know I like a guy. I just slowly start turning into him. I will buy the same clothes as him. I will steal his job.
And his girlfriend.
Steal his girlfriend. She'll be like, why am I in the trunk of this Honda? Like, don't worry about it. You're fine. But the funny full circle moment of that was that he had like plopped down next to me at like one of the comedy clubs at the bar one night when I was probably about a year in. And he was belligerent.
Oh.
Starts like kind of just patting at me and like grabbing my thighs and telling me that I'm way too pretty to do stand up and no one will ever take me seriously. And I was like, oh, I don't like you. But then I found this life path. So
Does he
it
still
was
do
meant to
stand
be.
up?
He sure does.
Stop it.
Yeah, I'll tell you off
Wait.
air.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I always
Wait.
love what Natasha Leggero says. When she started stand up, a lot of people would be like, "Aren't you too pretty to do stand up?" And she's like, "Aren't you too ugly to be talking to me?" I love that so much.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Excellent. Wow. Okay. So then when did you start stand up in LA?
So I had been here for 2 years. This was 2014. I was having what I half seriously refer to as a quarter life crisis. I didn't get to do real estate when I got here because I wasn't going to go get licensed and then put the money into that and then wait around and not have a check, not have a listing. I just couldn't. So it all was cosmically meant to be, I feel like, because that first job took it out of me so bad. It was so miserable. It was not real estate. I got out of that job just to go straight into another soul-sucking corporate job where every day just a little piece of me died. Every day. And one night, one of my friends had tickets, like free tickets to go see a show in the Original Room at the Comedy Store. And it had just never crossed my mind that that was a career path. I'm sure like both of you.
It still hasn't crossed my mind.
Yeah, totally. But I grew up not with what do you want to be when you grow up, but do you want to be a lawyer or a doctor? That was it. It was not an open-ended question of what I wanted to do. So art had never crossed my mind. And I thought real estate was a good way to settle into something that was both lucrative and feasible for my skill set. But I was there that night sitting in the Original Room, and I wasn't like a huge comedy fan, so I didn't know anybody that was at the lineup. But I'm watching the lineup and I'm loving it. It's so funny. And after like the third or fourth person, I'm like, hold on, this is a job? I want this job. And then
do you remember any of the people that you?
I do now, yeah. And then like 2 months later, I had written 5 minutes, went to an open mic. Didn't know that it was one of these like first come first serve where you had to get there 2 hours ahead of the mic starting.
We've all made that mistake.
We've all made that mistake. So I got there on time and was like, I don't know, 25th or 26th on the lineup. So by the time this actually turned out to be a blessing, because once it got to me, I had watched so many people bomb that I was like, well, I won't be the worst one here.
Right.
I'm not going to be worse than these people. So I got up and was mostly bombing, but then got one really good laugh at the end and was just hooked. From then on, started doing it daily and was like, yep, that's the path.
I love that you didn't have a comedy background because the same with me. Like I didn't grow up watching stand-up comedians, and I think you're the first person besides me on this podcast, I feel like, who didn't grow up listening to comedy albums and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I only knew a few. So I did have an ex-boyfriend back in college that introduced me to Cat Williams, and we would watch the Pimp Chronicles special all the time. I still know like every word of it. It's one of the best ever.
You watched it like multiple times?
I've watched it multiple times.
Wow.
Yeah, I started probably right when it came out, because this was, you know, not to age myself, but like 15 or 16 years ago. So I was watching it a lot back then, and then I had seen, I think like probably Dane Cook and like a couple other people. And then I remember Aziz came through my college, and I was like working with the event team. So I was part of putting that show on. That was like the first time I saw a show. And then I saw Bob Saget too when I was in college. And that was like all I knew. It was just the tip of the iceberg. I'm like, oh, those are comedians. They're people that are also on TV. So it didn't cross my mind that you could just be a comedian without having like a huge sitcom.
How do you feel like your approach or your attitude has like shifted over time?
Sure, it's gotten worse. No. I always have to recalibrate, because particularly last year when things were so challenging with my day job, I was having no less than 2 mental breakdowns a month, because I think you get to a point.
Bro, 2024, that's like, that's great.
Yeah,
that is great.
It's
true. 2 a month, that's it?
That's it. And I'm down to 1 a month, thankfully.
Oh my
but
God.
you know, it's only February, things can shift. But I think for me, especially once you get past like 7-8 years, you start getting into the 9-10 year range where you're like, excuse me, when is this going to become a job? Because for me, and I'm very lucky, it's at this point a part-time job. Like I am making money, but not enough consistently to live off of. And that's really, really tough, because the rest of my life is in shambles due to my pursuit of this dream. You know, like everything else gets put on the back burner, like trying to navigate relationships, trying to navigate how to be a responsible adult and handle things and have a job that still allows me the bandwidth to be able to write and be creative and pay my bills, because I'm not going to do the starving artist live on a couch. Like I like to live nicely. So just finding the balance of that.
I should also add, by like to live nicely, you probably mean like have a room of your own.
Yeah, have air conditioning.
Dishes.
Right. Yeah, I don't have a house here. Let's be very clear. So I just mean I can't do that thing of like living on a whim and just not knowing what's going on and being irresponsible. Like, I need to have it together. And in order to do that, you have to play this balancing act of having many jobs and then doing stand-up for free and sometimes for less than free, where it's like, that's what you sign up for. I'm lucky that I knew when I started, I would listen to podcasts and I would constantly hear established comedians be like, it takes 10 years, it takes 10 years. 10 was like this magic number that was floating around.
Right, isn't that funny?
It is. And as I approach that, because this year is 10 years for me,
Congratulations.
I'm like, thank you. But I'm like, oh, fuck, where's my career, you know? So it's hard. I view it this way. Wanting to be a professional comedian is feasible, but it is the equivalent of digging a tunnel with a spoon. So every time you sit down to write, it's a spoonful. Every time you go out and do a set, it's a spoonful. You listen back to it, it's a spoonful. And eventually maybe you book something that is like a credit, or you get to go open for a bigger comedian. Like, your toolkit gets a little better. Maybe you get a little hand shovel. Let's say you get like a special, or these days it's like, let's say you get a big following, so now you can headline. Now you have a shovel, right? Like, now it's a little easier to dig the tunnel, but that is the amount of work that I feel like this takes.
That's an incredible metaphor. I love
Great
that.
metaphor.
Thank you.
You forgot the part, though, that with every spoonful, you have to also eat
That's
the dirt.
correct.
Yeah.
And post a video of it online.
That's right.
Yeah.
Reels, baby.
That's cool.
But yeah, I think the 10-year thing really is changing, because I feel like if we had started stand-up 20 years ago, 10 years would be feasible. But I think now, I think just the amount of hopeful comedians is so much more. I've even noticed now versus when I started 7 years ago. I think, I mean, like I said before, I think it's the internet thing. I think people didn't see stand-up wasn't like coming into their homes the way it is coming in now. So now there's
That's
just
valid.
a greater demand to become one. I used to send out booking requests and be like, I'm a diverse woman. And people would be like, oh my, just please come perform on our stage. And now it's just like, so I feel like I'm just slog.
And it doesn't even, not to say it doesn't matter. I was about to be like, it doesn't matter if you're funny. If you have a huge following,
Yeah.
you can just have a career. But it's both, right? And I always have to remind myself, like, just because someone's a year or two in and they have a massive following, you can't shortcut the skill set. You cannot do an hour if you're brand new. It is what it is. Like, you can stand on stage and speak into a microphone for an hour. It is not going to be stand up. It's going to be something else. Like, there is no shortcut for developing the skills. It has taken me all of this time just to figure out how to be myself on stage, which is such a mind-boggling thing to realize.
Right.
Because I think you're like doing impressions of what you think a comedian should be, and you're emulating people that you look up to. And gradually over the years, I have figured out my own voice and how to be myself up there and how to be comfortable in that. And that feels really contradictory, but that has seemed to be the path.
I think that is actually a really great strength of you as a comedian that I've noticed. I do feel like you are so much yourself.
Thank you.
When you're on stage. And also I think your background of not having been in like acting and like have a degree in comedy, which some people apparently do nowadays, I feel like it gives you this realness on stage. That's I feel like so much of your charm and appeal.
Thanks. I
Yeah.
appreciate that.
Okay, so we're going to go to some questions now. Our first question is, Cleopatra was the queen of luxury. What's a luxury item you do not skimp on?
Ooh, okay. So can I give you two?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So the first one that has been with me for a few years is perfumes. I'm very into bougie perfumes. I just spoke with you about how London Hughes on your show that I did with her introduced me to Delfina Exclusive, which is a really bougie perfume. I have not bought that one yet.
It sounds exclusive.
It is. It's $300 a bottle. Pretty crazy. But I'm really into right now. My 2 cents are by Redo Gypsy Water. And
Oh, I love that brand.
it's so, I mean, it is just elegant.
Yeah.
It's
Also, as
fantastic.
first generation, slightly exotic, are we not drawn to the gypsy water?
That's so true. Yeah.
The scent I use for them is called Super Cedar. and
I know
really
that
like
one.
That
It's
one. It's super
so
good.
nice. That and Tom Ford. I always forget if it's called Lost Cherry or Dark Cherry, but those are my 2 cents that I only have in a travel size at the moment, but we are working towards a full size bottle. And then the other thing, so I just got into luxury hand soap. I decided that in my new apartment, I'm only going to have nice hand soaps because I wash my hands probably more than I should. I can't like touch an egg without washing my hands.
More than I should.
Yeah.
I do that too. Yeah. No touching eggs.
Mm-hmm.
And
So I invested in, you know, that brand Way.
Oh.
They have all the hair products.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
So they have this hand soap that doesn't dry out your hands. It smells so good. It leaves them so soft. And I'm like, okay, only this.
You should have a conversation with previous Cleopatra guest, Rima Dawn. She likes a good scent as well.
Ooh,
Yeah, that
okay.
was her bougie item as well. Me, it's just Dawn dish soap because it is a 2-in-1, never dries out my hands. And I also have a lot of oil-covered ducks in my backyard. And
As one does.
it's just a real clean two ducks with one stone kind of situation. Wow, what a great riff. That was worth all of that.
It
Can you
was, but
riff
then you
on-
notice.
Can you riff on Miss Myers? That's who I'm rocking and rolling with.
Okay, Ms. Myers. First of all, it's called Ms. Myers Clean Day. I'm like, just one?
Are they sponsoring the podcast?
I
or
know. What?
something?
Clearly not, because we've plugged too many things now. We're gonna have to. I don't know. This is like that weird scene in the Truman Show where she just works in product placement in normal conversation, and he's like, "Who are you talking to?" But I hate to use this term lightly, but Mrs. Myers is very triggering for me because
Do tell.
I first discovered that soap my first year of law school, and I used the lemon verbena soap, and that was the first time, and it just reminds me of like the trauma of the
Ooh.
first year of law school. So anytime I smell it, I'm like, oh my God, it's the first time that I felt intellectually inadequate.
Well, there will never be lemon verbena in my house.
Okay.
We are a basil and geranium.
Okay.
I get trauma from Bath and Body Works soap, so I
Oh,
feel you.
yeah.
Cucumber melon.
Oh
No.
my god!
I mean, look, no, if we're going full capital T trauma, it's going to be Victoria's Secret love spell.
yes.
Actually.
Did they have hand soap or just gross body
Just
creams?
disgusting amethyst colored Lisa Frank smelling rainbow crap.
I love
Listen,
that.
every guy I hooked up with in high school was like core memory.
I love that we all got that when we were like 12 because we wanted to smell like sex
Like a
cupcakes.
woman. This is what women smell like.
So Cleopatra was not actually from Egypt. She has more Grecian roots. She loved Egyptian culture. So what's a Ukrainian culture that you maybe can't let go of? And then what's an American custom that you have like really tied yourself to?
Okay. I like this. So one thing that I can't let go of is these dumb superstitions that my family
Ooh, I
has
love a
drilled
dumb
into me.
superstition. Let's drop
Oh.
them.
Okay, so never celebrating a birthday before your birthday. That is one that I am like have anxiety with now. So let's say your birthday is on a Monday, you don't get to go out the Saturday before. You have to push it to like the next Friday or Saturday if you're trying to celebrate on
So
a weekend.
you're not a 1 month birthday girly.
I'm not.
Wow, I'm such a 1 month birthday girly.
No, you are not
So
allowed to
presumptuous
celebrate
that you're going to
before.
live to tell the tale. Is that what it is? Is
That's
like
what
if
it
you
is.
preemptively
You're like
celebrate your.
jinxing it.
Wow.
Yep.
I love a good don't you goddamn dare superstition of like you sit down and you wait till this chicken fully hatches.
That's
I
right.
like that this one's like you will literally die.
You will not make it to your next birthday. So that's like, and then there's one soothing one, and I guess this doesn't fall so much on superstition, but there's this little like jingle when I wake up from a nightmare. I was taught this. I don't know what to call it besides a jingle. It sounds so stupid, but there's this little spiel that I say when I wake up from a nightmare to like shake it off of me. And so I still do that. And I do it in Russian when I wake up. And I am like these poor men that sleep over. And I get up in the middle of the night from having a nightmare and just like do this spiel in Russian. And they're like, is she possessed? It's probably why I'm alone.
Will you please
Do it,
Yes.
say it. So what it is, I'll explain it. So you wake up from your nightmare and you go tfu tfu tfu, and then you say it's not my bad dream, and then you list every member of your family, and you go, it's not my mother's, it's not my father's, it's not my brother's, it's not my sister's, and you like go through the Rolodex of your immediate family.
Oh my God.
Wow.
I need to do that after every bad set. Foot.
But you list every comedian
Yeah.
you're close to.
And then I just sit
Not
there.
my bad set.
It's not Lynn's bad set. It's not Galina's bad set. Foot.
I love that.
Oh, thank you.
I kind of love that. And it's to sort of ward off that the nightmare comes true.
Mm-hmm.
Or
I
is
think
it
it's
just to like get rid of
off
the vibes?
bad vibes? Yeah,
Okay.
for sure. It's to shake the vibes off. And what's an American one? And I'm sure I feel like you've probably talked about this on the podcast.
I
but
would love to drop a superstition
Oh,
my
please.
parents have dropped on
Yes.
me, and tell me if you've ever gotten this one. So they always say if you eat fish and then you eat yogurt and then you take a bath, you'll go crazy.
I'm trying that tonight.
That they literally made that up because you did that.
I've
once.
Googled it and I've seen it nowhere.
Okay.
Like nobody
Eat fish, then yogurt, then take a bath.
you'll go crazy.
Any further elaboration on why?
Who's eating yogurt after fish?
I mean, in Arab culture, you're eating a lot of yogurt,
okay.
or it's like
For, like,
yogurt
But not
with
preemptively?
fish. I think it's like yogurt with fish is
Okay.
really the deal.
Okay.
But I say we all try tonight.
Does that extend to like tzatziki? Like how deep are we going?
yeah,
with
yeah,
this?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, for sure.
I am already crazy if I do fish,
we'll
yogurt.
normalize
Should I
you.
take a bath, then eat yogurt, then
Yeah,
do
what if you
fish,
eat it
and
in the
that'll
tub?
fix me? We could do reverse.
Yeah, I think that's how it
Okay,
works.
good. And then I'll like wake up tomorrow, tfu, and then I'll absolutely have my shit together and stop crying at the dentist.
Please, for the love of Allah, if someone here listening to this podcast has heard the yogurt fish bath thing, please DM
write
me
in
immediately.
Cleopatra@gmail.com. Write in with your silly superstitions. You tell us, make up a story. We'd love to hear it. Maybe we'll read it on the air. Okay, and then what about the American custom?
American customs. So, not using plastic bags for everything. Things have their own ordained bags. You got lunch boxes. You got Tupperware. My family is just really big on, and especially because in Ohio you can still access the plastic bags. They still give them to you at the grocery store. So they're just big on using those. They use them for the dog poop. I actually just buy dog poop bags. I splurge.
Wow,
Yeah.
huge splurge.
I know. I think poop bags are the most American thing because I can't believe my mom is still adhering to that she just refuses to buy dog poop bags. I leave them for her. Every time I come home, I'm like, here's some dog poop bags. And then I come home and they're nowhere to be found.
Wow, maybe she's using them for other
No,
things.
I think she's storing them away, hiding them from me. So I don't
Fair.
get disappointed.
She's not keeping like old
certainly
pierogies in the
not.
fridge in them. I'm guessing pierogies is
Oh,
a
we love
staple.
pierogies,
Okay,
absolutely.
pierogies are happening.
There's the Soviet version is pelmeni.
Ooh,
Yeah, but same thing.
I'm not even going to try to say that.
I can't say. I guess they're pilmeni.
Pilmeni?
Every
Okay.
once in a while, I see them at a grocery store. Trader Joe's has like a little
Of course
knockoff.
they
Of
do.
course they do.
Oh, what's
Trader
their name?
Joe.
Trader, because we were talking about we want a Trader Muhammad's or Trader Mo's, and there was the Trader Giotto's. What would the Ukrainian one be?
Trader Vladimir. I don't know.
Trader Vlad's.
I
All right.
love Trader Vlad's.
Trader Igor.
And now it is time for our final segment called Dig Deep. This is where we ask the deep questions. Okay, I will ask the first one. Cleopatra was portrayed very famously in 1963 by Elizabeth Taylor. If your life were a crossover episode of two television shows or a cross between two films, what would they be and who would play you?
I used to get Mila Kunis
I've
every
always
once in a
thought
while.
that.
Thank you. And there is something to be said about, I feel like Ukrainian Jews all kind of look the same. And I know you're not supposed to say that about people's cultures, but it is what it is. I can spot one of mine from 100 feet away.
That's so funny.
So there's that of just like having similar bone structure. I wonder what TV shows it would be. I think maybe, I mean, I am such a freaking huge Fast and Furious fan. So I just have to throw that into the mix. I don't know how that makes sense.
Because family is so important to you.
Family is so important.
Yeah.
That with maybe Broad City or something like that. Something with like broke girls keeping it real.
I love
I
that.
love Broad City. One of my all-time favorites.
Yeah.
And then Cleopatra was known as a scholar, a warmonger, I guess, is one of her legacies, a leader.
Batty.
So many things. What would you want your legacy to be, and or what would you like your epitaph to read?
Picture this. You celebrated your birthday one day too early. All right? It's
You have
over for
died.
you. You asked for it. You're dead now. What's your legacy?
Oh my gosh, am I restricted to 140 characters on the epitaph? This is like Twitter stuff. She lived, she loved, she laughed. Oh gosh. The legacy is easier to answer just because I don't know about the epitaph, but I work really, really hard at trying to find happiness because it's you come to learn that it's not about, oh, I'm gonna get this thing and be happy, because if that's your attitude going into it, guess what? You're going to get the thing and then you're not going to be happy. So you have to focus on trying to do it now. So I'm trying to find space where I can be what I like to call as realistically woo-woo. Because I very much subscribe to all these manifestation things. But to me, it's not about producing things out of thin air. It's about the basis in manifestation, which is that you have to think happy thoughts. And you have to make sure that your brain is working towards the positive always, that you're catching yourself when you're being mean to yourself and you're going, you know what, I have to come up with a nicer thing to say to myself in this moment so that I can vibrate higher, so that I can attract things that I want into my life. So that, and being a really fucking funny.
Hell yeah.
I love that so much. I guess I have two questions. Number one, loaded. How do you define that, being happy?
So being excited for things, that's a really good question. I define it as just being content and sitting in gratitude. Like, I have a perfect dog and I look at him all the time and my heart swells and I'm like, you're so perfect. I'm so grateful for you. Like, I'm so happy I can just like stare and just finding the joy in things that I already have, which I guess is just gratitude in general, but making sure that I find that and really trying to be careful what I'm digesting throughout the day. Like with the war in Ukraine, for example, I had to just stop looking at things because I'm like, unfortunately, I'm powerless in this. And if I continue digesting it at the level that I was and how rapid fire, like when things first started, I'm like, it's like eating junk food, right? You have to kind of treat your brain the same, I feel like. You have to look for positive thoughts and just understand what's in your control and what's not. And just try to find the good, because the only influence I can have, I feel like, is immediate influence of people around me. So if I can be high vibes, truly, if I can like be happy and impact people immediately around me that way. And because, you know, you feel the energy when someone is like pissed off, when they're in a bad mood, they come into the room, everybody feels it. I just don't want to be that person. I want to feel good so everyone around me can feel good.
That's a really good point. Do you listen to any podcasts, books, or any other like resources on happiness? There's so many things.
She surfs
Every
gets
day.
sun.
I don't surf every day, but I listen to like different meditations and stuff every day. I'm deep into Abraham Hicks stuff, which is like a very woo-woo one. But it like started, I used to work at a guided meditation studio. So I got into like Thich Nhat Hanh and Eckhart Tolle and like all these Joe Dispenzas, all these people that talk about that kind of stuff. So every morning I either do a meditation or I listen to an Abraham Hicks. And then I'm always trying to just read books about, I recently read one called Rewiring Your Brain, that's just like about, or no, it's called Hardwiring Happiness. And it's about picking positive thoughts. And the more self-help books I read, the more I feel like they're all talking about the exact same thing.
Right.
I wish I had one of those brains that knew how to attribute quotes properly to people. I have no idea where I heard this, but it really stuck with me that it's not about the pursuit of happiness. It's about the happiness of pursuit, that you have to find it in all the things that you're doing.
And I will quote everyone's high school yearbook quote and say, candy is dandy, but liquor is quicker. Did you have a yearbook quote?
No, I don't think I did. But if I did, I would be like probably Dom Toretto. I live my life a quarter mile at a time. Fast and Furious, you two are both staring at me like
Pour one out.
Every time she says anything about Fast and Furious, my eyes like leave my body.
It's one of those things that's so fun to love loudly, and people are like, "Are you serious?" And I'm like, "I'm dead serious, bro."
Is it the longevity? Is it
everything?
Okay.
It's everything.
I would like to hear more about this. Like, and I want like a dissertation. I want like I want you to
I'm
make
the
your
guy
case.
to write it.
Okay.
I absolutely could get a PhD on this. It started with me actually genuinely being into cars and having a crush on Paul Walker.
I was just about to say, was it because you had a crush on a guy? Is it
Is
because you had a crush on a car?
Everything starts. I had a crush on a Supra. And then it just turned into like, it started getting so epically ridiculous. And if you haven't seen them, this won't make sense. But it starts with like street racing. And by the 9th movie, they're in space. So the growth of the action in the, it's
like
so
actually
insane.
basically Elon Musk's story.
Essentially, it just keeps getting more and more epic. And then there's all these like Easter eggs in the last couple movies where they're paying homage to people that are fans and that have been in it the whole time. So it's like fun. It's just
like a
really
community.
fun. And I don't think they're taking themselves seriously. I think when you watch the movies, you understand how ridiculous it is and that it's intentionally ridiculous because that's what people have come to expect from it. I mean, my favorite scene from any of them is in the 7th movie. The Rock has been hospitalized, right? He gets into like a huge fight with Jason Statham's character, and then the team needs him. So he's in the hospital room and his daughter's with him, and he goes, "Daddy's got to go to work." And he's got a cast on his arm and he flexes and breaks the cast. And I'm like, how could this not be everyone's favorite movie?
Literally, Galina did not breathe in retelling that. She was so excited.
Beautiful.
I think your new quote is "Daddy's got to go to work."
That's right.
Daddy's got to go
That's
to
my
work.
epitaph.
Yeah.
Now
That's your epitaph.
We got there.
Daddy went to work. Daddy's got to go to bed now. Galina Rivina, you are truly a successful person, not just because you're funny and you're smart, but you actually really do embody what you said you try to do, which is
Thank you so much.
uplift people and be just a joy to be around. So we can't thank you enough for being
Thank you so much
here.
for having me.
You're
I'm such
so
a fan
lovely.
of both of yours. I'm
We
so
love
glad
you
we're
so
friends.
much. What would you like to promote? Where can people find you?
Sure. So all my socials are Thumb Galina,
Lean in.
THUMB GALINA, not Thumb Galina. And then I do intend to revamp my podcast, which you'll both have to be on, which is lovingly called the Galina Rivina Podcastina. So
I love
keep your eyes and ears open for that. Thank you so much for having me.
We will link to Ms. Galina's beautiful socials in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining us. I've been Christy Vana.
I'm Lynn Molly.
I'm Galina Rivina.
See you next time. Goodbye.
Bye.